taught me to be aware of cultural differences. But in the next breath, would tell me that no matter what the color of a person's skin, deep down inside, we're all the same. This always felt like a contradiction to me, to be aware of color and culture, but yet at the same time, to be blind to it. I've always believed race mattered. And when we tell children, or even adults, to be colorblind, we're doing more harm than good. In a 2010 study titled When Not Thinking Leads to Being Doing by Natalie Wire, we learned that in a 2010 study published in the Journal of Social Psychological and Personality Science, found that people who work to suppress stereotypes often demonstrate more prejudicial behaviors than people who accept them. In other words, by trying to be colorblind, we are actually preventing our biases from being challenged, and instead, those biases become our actions. In order for us to understand this cultural problem, we must first define colorblindness and consider its effects. Second, we will analyze why this is a problem, and finally, we will find some solutions. Ashley Doan, author of The Changing Politics of Colorblind Racism of 2009, tells us that being colorblind means to not notice or purposely ignore race, even diversity among cultures. People seem to think, if I don't see race, then I definitely can't call it racist. So then, what's the problem? Well, considering the three major effects of colorblindness, overgeneralized similarities, exaggerated differences, and suppressed stereotypes, we learned that being colorblind is the problem. First, overgeneralized similarities. Bradford J. Hall, author of Among Cultures, published in 2009, writes that humans are not cultural robots, meaning everyone in a cultural group is not the same. Unfortunately, in an attempt to be colorblind, people overgeneralize similarities among groups and then assume everyone's alike. The January 28, 2010 Chicago Tribune points out that discussions about race don't come easily. Parents, specifically white parents, talk in code, using ambiguous language such as everyone is equal and under the skin we're all the same. In a colorblind society, people not only teach themselves to ignore racial identity, but worse, ignore the essential question of human existence. Who am I? And who are you? Second, exaggerated differences. Hall clarifies that once we assume everyone's the same, the differences we face in our daily interactions become that much more exaggerated. The January 16, 2011 Los Angeles Times quotes Ryan Bell, an African American. Why does everyone assume that just because I'm black, I play basketball? In the Washington Post on August 22, 2010, New York University psychologist David Amodio explains, our brains are wired to create snap judgments on race. We can't ignore these judgments. Our brains will never be colorblind. This is because our brains are wired to create categories to sort information. Amodio also shows that when prejudice escapes, people become more cautious in situations in which they might again express bias. But the wiring is still there, so one stereotype will simply be replaced with another. And third, suppress stereotypes that lead to prejudiced behavior. The Lima News of December 22, 2010 says, in America, it seems like we like our identities in neat categories, whether one is black or white, straight or gay. Stereotypes are assumed labels, and they can be changed. However, they can also be dangerous and turn into prejudices. In a 2010 study titled, When Not Thinking Leads to Being and Doing by Natalie Wire, we learned that suppressing stereotypes often results in more stereotype use, and thought suppression can lead to unintended outcomes. People act on their misconceptions instead of talking about them. With an understanding of what colorblindness is and its harmful ways, we can now regard 3 reasons why people still consider themselves colorblind. First, we have been taught to play it safe since the civil rights movement. Ashley Doan also tells us that colorblindness emerged after the Civil Rights Movement. Lamar Smith from Fox News on July 22nd, 2010, says, being racist means treating people differently because of their race. Colorblindness started with the best of intentions. Simply not thinking about race would eradicate racism. But study after study has proven this idea wrong. Second, we fear unknown differences. Americans have been taught that noticing race is wrong and bigoted. However, Time on September 6, 2010, quotes Douglas Hartman. Americans prefer to talk about colorblindness. For one, it's impossible. For another, it's offensive. It blurs the real problems communities are dealing with. He goes on to say that the way you experience the world and what perspective you bring is essentially determined by your race. Sometimes this comes in little forms. For example, I would never know how it feels like to get a sunburn. I'm brown. Third, we don't know how to have a racial dialogue. Over the last 5 years, we have been faced with breaking news stories involving public figures making racist or prejudicial statements. The Brown Daily Herald of October 25, 2010 says, quotes, explains how Juan Williams had been fired from NPR by saying to Bill O'Reilly that the sight of apparent Muslims as fellow passengers on a plane made him nervous. We forget how to have a dialogue. We forget how to discuss race in a respectful manner. With an insight into colorblindness and its harmful ways, and the reasons behind it, we can now regard 3 solutions that can avoid us from its effects. First, be color conscious. Second, have conversations. And third, don't be afraid. First, be color conscious. Acknowledge race. Make an effort to get to know people different from you. Perhaps share your food from home, learn a new dance, listen to music, or have a multicultural party, or simply watch a movie with another perspective, with subtitles if you have to. The Brown Daily Herald on November 26, 2010, quoted comedian Ahmed, if we can laugh at each other's close sacred rituals while respecting them at the same time, we're able to approach other people's funny-looking businesses better and approach our own with a little humor. And second, have conversations about the unfamiliar. Understanding a new concept can be hard, but we need to explore the unfamiliar and have conversations about race. For example, actors Ron Jones, an African American, and Larry Tisch, a Jew, performed their 2-man show called The Black Jew Dialogues across the country. According to the Courier of November 17, 2010, they encourage people not to try to be colorblind, but to instead embrace differences. With an understanding of what colorblindness is and its harmful ways, and the reasons behind it, we found some solutions. People differ, and they differ in important ways which contribute significantly to the rich diversity of American life. Only when we are color-sighted can freedom flourish vigorously. So go ahead, taste the rainbow. Okay, good. All right, so Luigi's over there, still